Good afternoon, everybody. This is Clinton with Oval Window Racing. As you can see, we're back in the garage today, and we're going to continue tearing down this short block. Previous videos, you've seen me go from a long block down to a short block, and we discussed these cylinder heads, studs, and it looks like somebody has actually trimmed them. Because I can actually go down in the back side here. This one actually goes all the way down into the case, and it's right at flush level. So somebody did cut them. You can see that they are cut. So we're going to remove them today. And they go out well. Maybe we'll split the case in half too, but we'll probably just get to removing these studs. The reason for removing them is because we're going to replace them. And we're going to replace them with these handy dandy 8mm studs. You can see the size difference. The factory in the early cases used a 10mm stud, and then later started using a 8mm stud. And for cost reasons, we just kind of cleaned up these factory studs that I pulled off from one of my buddy's other engines. Other reasons you may want to remove these is to help clean the case up. And if you're going to get any machine work done, your machinist would be thrilled to have them removed, because what he's going to probably do is charge you to remove them anyways. The other thing we're going to do is have case inserts installed, or case savers I call them. It's something the factory also did in later cases when they went to the 8mm head studs. A couple different reasons I want to install them is these are factory ones. You can see these are blind, they call. They don't go all the way through, like a hole on one side. And for these studs that go all the way through, I like to have those in there if it's possible. I got to talk to my machinist to see if they can insert these. It may be a different thread. You may have to go with a different one. The other thing is they are stronger. From what I understand, they help keep the head from pulling out of the case. That was one of the reasons the factory decided to put the case savers in. So let's get to work. I'll show you how this is done. All right, tools that are going to be needed are two 15mm wrenches and two stock head stud nuts. There's a couple different ways of doing this, but I've always used the what they call the double nut reason, or double nut method. So the trick is to put two nuts on there. Sometimes it's a trick to get them on there. And we're just going to tighten them down on top of each other like this. Like so. Then we're going to take the bottom nut and just lefty loosey righty tight, and we're just going to unscrew the stud. Sometimes this can be a real bugger, especially if they've been on there for a long time, but I'm hoping, since this case was machined, I don't know how many years ago it was built up at one time, but head studs were removed and reinstalled. And when you get close to the top, I like to loosen them back up. I like to start with the longer studs and work my way down to the shorter studs. If you start with the shorter studs, the longer studs get in the way. So let's get this side all done. The other method is there's a tool you can use. It goes on a socket wrench. You just put it over there, and it kind of binds itself onto the threads when you go to remove it. And those work pretty nice, but they do kind of bar up the threads. So if you tend to reuse your head studs or bolts, you got that to deal with. Now I like to save these longer 10mm head studs here. One thing that can be done with them if you build on trannies is the lower part of the tranny, you use them as a through bolt, they call it. Helps keep the side covers on and strengthen up that lower part of the transmission where the pinions like to snap. Or I should say where the case likes to stretch, which would cause the pinions to break, ring and pinions. The other thing I'll probably save are these center upper head studs here. They're the shorter ones, designed for the dual port engines. A lot of 10mm case studs were a single port, which would be longer. And if you're going to run a dual port heads, you have to cut them down to make room for the extra ports. Or if you're lucky enough to find the 10mm head studs from the factory, usually save them and reuse them for those purposes, just like this was done. Oh, there goes that. Excuse me. I was just over there. One more to go on this side. All right, this side's done. Now it's time to flip it over and do the other side. All right, now we just repeat the process from the other side. I'd like to point out that when you go to reinsert the head studs, it's kind of the same process, just backwards, of course. Instead of wrenching on the bottom nut, you'll just tighten it with the top nut. Been lucky with these head studs. Probably shouldn't talk, I'm not done yet, but they've come out relatively easily. I should say really easy. Sometimes, like I said, they can be a bugger. So much so that heat is required. But hey, who doesn't like playing with fire? Fire, fire. Don't know why they cut these head studs. I mean, sometimes they do have a issue with hitting the rocker arms if they're too long. But when I looked earlier, I didn't really notice any clearance issues there. It's something we'll have to pay attention to when we start reassembling the new engine. Other mishap, when I started cleaning the cylinders, I noticed that one that was stuck in the head cracked. Probably was, I don't know if it was from him installing it, kind of pressing it into the cylinder head, or if it was when I was removing it from the cylinder head. It was probably the removal, because I had to kind of wiggle it out. There wasn't much room in there. It's probably what caused it to crack. So we are unable to reuse the old cylinders. So we are in search of 4 new cylinders. So it gave me a little trouble. Actually, I like seeing this. This is a deep stud. Some of the 10 millimeter cases weren't a deep stud. Factory in later years, actually, instead of mounting this stud, so deep here, they actually got it drilled down, so it's grabbing closer to the main bearing. It was kind of their cure to keep the case from cracking on the back side here. So we got to put a little more muscle in there and hope it comes out. Looks like I got it. That was what I was going to have actually have done. Discuss that with my machinist, and going to tell him to make sure that this was a deep stud. One of the things that always pretty much upgrade. I think I mentioned that in an earlier video about cases cracking in the backside behind cylinder number 3. Muscles. Can't see down in there, it's dark. I don't know if he's got a saver in there or not. Magnet's not grabbing anything. I think if there was a case saver down in there, it might have been hard to get it back out and put an 8 millimeter one in there. I might have been stuck putting 10 millimeter studs back in. Alright, now that we got that done, we're just going to check to see if these may screw in there. And I see They are not going to. So they'll need to be drilled and retapped for these. But if that's not going to be good enough, I got a whole brand new set here that we can stick in there. But just like the aftermarket ones, they go all the way through. They're not blind. I'll leave that up to the machinist to see if he what's easier for him. It looks like they're two different threads, so you have to drill and tap two different holes. Maybe easier just do them all the same. The other thing, like I've noticed before, this thing should spin around, flop back and forth. And I've been doing some thinking on that. With probably the guy did is a novice mistake. A lot of people do it on their first engine build. Is they've probably got the locating pin for the main bearing. There's a hole in the main bearing where that locating pin is supposed to go in there and keep it from spinning around. A lot of times what will happen is when you're installing the crank with those bearings in there, one of them will move out, or more than one of them, and then you wind up pushing that pin into the bearing, and then that'll bite hold of the crank. And I'm almost guaranteeing that's what's happened, but we won't know until we split the case. I'm going to save that for a future video. But that's it for today. I'll catch you guys later.